Malaise, the infectious virus in the Dead Cells world, and also the bane of every fortified PC player's existence. It's quite a difficult thing to deal with, and sometimes it's the difference between full health and almost no health. It can also be a little complicated in terms of how to handle it, whether we're talking about what it is, how to reduce it, and how to manage it. And we're going to cover all that today. But first, if you're seeing me for the first time, I like to do a lot of Dead Cells guides, 5BC runs, and commentaries. I also do a lot of Skull the Hero Slayer, as well as commentaries on social issues, amongst other things. So if any of that interests you, feel free to hit the subscribe button and the bell for notifications, and let's get started. For those not in the know, Malaise is a mechanic in Dead Cells where if you take a hit from certain enemies, you take what's known as a Malaise stack. In short, 10 of these Malaise stacks means that you will go down to 10% of your HP. Whether you were previously at full HP or at 11% HP, you're always going to go down to 10%. And before, it used to be you were dead, but now it's 10%. Now, I should note there is a difference based on the BC or the boss cell that you're playing. Fortified BC players encounter Malaise from nearly every enemy, but if you're not on Fortified BC, Malaise is actually still a part of the game, and you may have seen this before. The 3 elites in High Peak Castle, the one that you get the key from, they actually give you 2 Malaise stacks per hit, which means that yes, even on 0 BC, you can also hit high Malaise. But for the most part, you're only going to ever have a significant interaction with Malaise on Fortified BC. And it's worth it to note that every enemy outside of spawned enemies can infect you with Malaise. Spawned enemies include stuff like the corpse juices, the sewer flies, corpse worms, all those good stuff. And the Malaise counter serves really one purpose in Dead Cells: to prevent face taking. An often used strategy for many people before version 1.9 was to face tank with survival builds, especially the heavy crossbow, and due to the tanky nature of survival, you usually ended up getting wins up to 3 BC. What ended up happening, unfortunately, was that once the player hit 4 BC, they would end up accruing Malaise and have that max stack of 10 by like the second biome, something like that. So needless to say, it's something that is an important mechanic in this game, and it's something that you really need to watch out for. And in my opinion, Malaise is a great mechanic for, yes, obviously preventing face tanking, but the other thing that is happening is because of this, what it does well is that it forces players to learn how to not get hit. And whether we're talking about shields or no shields, it's all really the same. You don't want to get hit in this game, even on survival. And without that Malaise function, face tanking would run the entire meta, and that just wouldn't be fun for anyone to watch or even to play. So, needless to say, I'm a huge fan of it. There is a difference in how you look at Malaise depending on your build. Like if you're running tactics, you're going to be taking a significant damage from the second biome onwards, so you're more worried about your health rather than Malaise. Survival is the complete opposite, where you can be at full health but Malaise will be the bane of your existence, since you may often get hit due to the slow nature of most survival weapons. And Brutality is square in the middle of tactics and survival, but interestingly enough, in my opinion, Brutality has the best Malaise prevention options, and we're going to get into those options right now. So over the course of your Dead Cells runs, you're going to encounter food items. These will either have 15 or 50% healing, which is 30 and 100 gastronomy respectively. In Fortified BC, what happens is that you have 2 types of food, infected and uninfected. The uninfected food reduces Malaise and is almost always a good thing outside of one particular case, which I'll highlight at the end of the video. If you've been on this channel long enough, you know what weapons I like, you probably know what I'm talking about. Infected food will heal you, but increase your Malaise counter by 1. So this cannot be a huge deal if you have at the most a couple Malaise stacks, but are low on health, which is usually seen in tactics, brutality, or 2 to 4 times builds. You're guaranteed at least 1 uninfected healing item per level. And in Fortified BC food shops that are located in the Morass of the Banished, Ossuary, Rampart, Stilt Village, Graveyard, and the 5BC spoiler area. In 0 to 3 BC, the food shops look a little different than Fortified BC. In 0 to 3 BC, you have the 15% healing item, the 50% healing item, and just a regular health flask. In Fortified BC, however, you have the 50% healing item and the flask, but also something called cough syrup. And cough syrup reduces Malaise counter by 30%, which can make a huge difference when you're dealing with high Malaise. For example, high Malaise in this game is considered to be 5 and up, or halfway and up. And taking away 30% of that means you're down from 5 out of 10 to 2 out of 10, which is amazing. And taking a health flask also gets rid of 50% malaise as well as a usual 60% heal. In addition, shields block malaise, so even if you're just holding it up, which can be good if you're dealing with a really terrible mob, you don't take malaise, which is awesome. Another way to manage malaise is through mutations, and I'll outline each mutation and what they do, but in short, malaise reducing as opposed to preventing items are as follows: extended healing, necromancy, and alienation. Malaise prevention mutations are Berserker, Soldier's Resistance, Melee, Tactical Retreat, and Dead Inside, which, by the way, I just found out is not unlocked from the start anymore, which is kind of weird. Apparently they're unlocked through the Lancers. I think it's like 4 BC plus or something like that. It's a little weird, but yeah, that's the change that they made. I'll try to quickfire these since there's a few to cover, starting out with the reduction ones and then moving on to the preventions. So extended healing is a survival mutation in which you kill an elite and you have a 30% chance of being able to heal your melee stack by 1. You also heal 85% of your health, but the heal is kind of slow. Necromancy is another survival mutation in which if you're below 50% HP, killing enemies restores HP until you hit that 50%. It reduces your melee stack by 4 after a boss clear, even with Dead Inside. Alienation is a colorless mutation, and every time you kill 5 enemies on a curse, you heal 2 melee stacks. It also heals 5% HP per enemy killed on a curse. Most curses are 10 enemies, and alienation increases that amount by 1.5 times, so if you clear a 10 enemy curse such as Imprisoned Depths or Ossuary, you will heal 75% HP and 6 melee stacks due to the fact that there are 15 enemies because of that 1.5 times modifier. This can turn the entire run around. Berserker is a brutality mutation. It's one of the first of the prevention mutations. Melee attacks cause enemy attacks to be reduced by 10% at 1 brutality scroll and 60% at 14 for 3 seconds. During that 3-second period, you cannot be infected by malaise. So if you like to go fast, Berserker is the best option for you for not incurring malaise. Soldier's Resistance basically increases your HP, starting from 2% at 1 brutality scroll and 25% at 19, and you can only be infected by malaise every 1.2 seconds. This means for multi-attack enemies like slashers or in mobs if you take multiple hits, if it occurs within those 1.2 seconds of the first initial hit, you will only take the initial malaise. You will not take anything subsequent. Knife throws are another great example of this. Melee is another brutality mutation in which you slow down enemies when you hit them with a melee attack and you are immune to malaise from them for 1 second. Tactical Retreat is a tactics mutation, the only tactics mutation that has anything to do with malaise. And if you dodge an enemy's attack, they are slowed for 1 second at 1 tactic scroll and 3 seconds for 25 tactics. You will be impervious to malaise for that amount of time. Dead Inside is another colorless mutation, and it increases malaise stack counter from 10 to 16, and your max HP is increased by 50. I like to take Dead Inside at the end of the run for the final boss. It's typically a good option just to have more health and be a little bit bulkier. I'll note a couple things here and move on from the mutations. Not all of these mutations work in the long run, especially Tactical Retreat due to the already glass cannon nature of tactics. For the final boss fight, depending if you're on 4 and 5 BC, as I said, Dead Inside is typically a good mutation to take for that extra health and malaise cushion. Berserker is typically preferred on brutality builds, but Soldier's Resistance is also quite good. In terms of infected food, Berserker can actually work if you kill an enemy and pick up the food within that 3-second window. This is the number one question that I tend to get from people who watch my stuff, and it's how do I get used to malaise? There's nothing like it in 0 to 3 BC outside of the high peak castle elites, but you're probably not going to take any hits from those elites unless you really overthink it. And as I said earlier, many players up until they hit 4 BC tend to face tank and get punished by the malaise factor. It's just kind of natural to face tank. The reality is that in the 4 BC landscape, it's actually not the worst thing in the world. It forces you to get inherently better at the game. So at some point you go from taking those 10 hits in the first 2 biomes to only maybe taking like 2 or 3. And while that sounds daunting and impossible, the more you figure out the enemy attacking patterns, the less you're going to get hit. In addition, you can always use a shield and be able to block out attacks and things of that nature. It's just a learning experience. You gotta keep that growth mindset when playing this game. Just because you take a bunch of hits early on, it doesn't mean you're bad. Just gotta improve. Just gotta look at where you need to get better. It's really all it is. Survival, I would say, is actually the toughest when it comes to malaise management. There are certainly ways to deal with it, especially with like shields and stuff. But because survival weapons are generally slow, you're gonna be taking hits in return. Granted, the damage you'll be taking won't be much due to survival being bulky and survival weapons having amazing recovery, but the malaise counter can become a problem. Brutality sees this somewhat, but if you take Berserker, you'll most likely not run into any issues. Tactics, in my opinion, malaise is a complete afterthought. Once you're in the third biome, whether you go into the optional biome, Prison Depths / Corrupted Prison or otherwise, you're not going to be taking a lot of hits. It's health that's more of a concern than the actual malaise. If shields are not your thing, learning how to dodge, use the wall rune to avoid mobs and enemies, being good at spacing and placement, these are all things that you're going to need to know how to learn. Most of it just comes with practice, but take note of when you get hit and why this may happen, and same thing when you die in this game. Did you try to bull rush enemies without thinking of a backup plan? Did you try dodging way too early or way too late? Could you have approached the situation differently? And I think that's really where learning how enemies interact and learning the general environment of the biome and the game in general can be super helpful. What you're capable of doing in which spots. Earlier I did say that there was a situation in which you don't really want to take the uninfected food, and that's really, it's just the Fran-tic sword, honestly. You guys have been watching this run that I'm probably going to put in post, and the Fran-tic sword is the only weapon that can be affected by malaise. That's why it's so good, because once you're at 5 malaise, you probably won't be taking that many hits because of the fact that Fran-tic sword just does so much damage. People usually know the Fran-tic sword as having crits if you're at 50% HP or below, but it can actually have that same crit effect if you have 50% or more malaise. What I personally like doing is getting hit by like the rats or the knife throwers in prisoner quarters, since they don't do that much damage. I get up to 6 malaise stacks so that if I come across uninfected food, I can just take it, and I go from there. It's a very quick and easy way to set up one of the most powerful and efficient weapons in the game. Malaise, in my opinion, is something that initially seems horrible, but actually becomes not a huge deal over time. It's just something that you get used to, but those first several 4BC runs may not be great for you. I would say just keep working at it. Every boss has had something that may have taken you a while to get used to, whether it's a lack of health flasks, the enemies hitting harder, or really anything else. It just takes practice and patience. If you have any questions or if there's anything that I missed, feel free to leave a comment. If you liked the video and want to see more stuff like this, be sure to hit subscribe and like for more content. And I hope you all enjoyed this guide. I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.
Looking sideways, but how am I the one to blame when you're distorting pictures? Calling my name. Looking sideways, but how am I the one to blame?